The account of Jesus before Pilate from Matthew chapter 27. To get us to that, you also be seeing the part that's right before it. The story of Jesus and his passion, or how he poured out himself for the sins of the world, is really long. And before we get to Pilate, we want to just make sure you know where it is. So I'm going to kind of rush through this a little more quickly, and we'll slow down when we get to Jesus before Pilate. But Jesus and his disciples were at the Garden of Gethsemane. And they were kind of sleepy, and then here comes Judas, and he had been paid 30 pieces of silver, and he kissed Jesus. Now, he did that because previously he had made this arrangement. When you see me kiss the man, that's how you know who he is, because they didn't have a great way of recognizing people in those days. It was going to be dark. You want to make sure you arrested the right guy. And so that's what Judas did that night. And he said, "Greetings, Rabbi." I gave him a kiss, and Jesus said, "Do what you came for, my friend." And the soldiers came and they arrested Jesus. At that moment, there was the servant of the high priest, Malchus, was there, and Peter grabbed his little sword he had and actually cut off the ear of that servant, not understanding that Jesus was willingly going to suffer and die. And Jesus, he said that. You want to do that. In fact, Jesus healed that servant's ear. So Jesus was led away. It was just kind of weird because Jesus wasn't a fighting group, but he was taken away by a bunch of soldiers, and all the disciples were scared and they fled and they went away. And then Jesus was brought before Caiaphas, the high priest, the first spot, the Jewish legal people. And Peter was able to hang out in the court and kind of see what was going on because John had a way to get in. And they had people try to accuse Jesus of stuff, but they were all false witnesses, and they made up stories, and they just couldn't agree on what they were going on. There were a couple that knew that Jesus said he was going to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. But Jesus was really talking about his body and how he would die and rise from the dead. But they couldn't find anything he did wrong because he didn't do anything wrong. And Caiaphas just asked Jesus, "Aren't you going to answer?" And Jesus wasn't going to answer. But he said, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of God?" And Jesus said, "Yes. And you will see me come in glory." He gave him the truth. And Caiaphas tore his clothes and was ready to condemn him, but he didn't have the power to put him to death. So after he condemned him, he then had to send him. And here's where our story really comes up, because after all the Sanhedrin, the religious leaders, all agreed he's worthy of death, they couldn't kill him. So they had to send him to Pilate. The soldiers took Jesus, they spit on him, they slapped him, they mocked him, they struck him, and then they brought him, after mocking him, to Pilate, the governor, the Roman governor of the spot. When Jesus came before Pilate, who was very smart, very good political leader, he wasn't Jewish, but he knew the Jewish people. He was there to question and do what was right. And one of the things he asked Jesus is, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus said, "Yes, it is as you say." I mean, Jesus was letting him know that his kingdom wasn't of this world, but he really is the king of the Jews according to the Bible and who he was. All kinds of the religious leaders, they didn't want to come in the presence of the Roman people to become unclean, but they accused him. He has done this and that and the other thing, all kinds of accusations that they thought would get the Roman governor mad. And Jesus didn't respond at all. Usually people would complain or yell stuff back, but he just sat there. Like it was prophesied, like a sheep before her shearers is silent. And Pilate asked, "Don't you hear how many things they're accusing you of?" And Jesus just stood there. He didn't respond. And Pilate had great amazement for what had happened. And now he didn't want to condemn Jesus because Jesus didn't do anything wrong. So he knew it was a custom at this feast of the Passover to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. And he thought, I can get things off of my hands here. So he said to the crowd, "Which one do you want me to release to you? Barabbas, this really awful insurrectionist, or Jesus, who is called Christ?" And he kind of knew it was out of envy, or they were jealous of him. So he figured the crowd would be in favor of Jesus, who was actually popular, not this bad guy Barabbas. But the chief priests had gotten the crowd all wound up, and they actually yelled, "Not give us Jesus, but give us Barabbas." And he asked, "What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called Christ?" And the chief priests got them all to yell, "Crucify him, crucify him." And Pilate was like, "Why? What crime has he committed?" And they didn't care. They didn't have an answer. They just said, "Crucify him, crucify him." They were becoming a mob and wanting to make it happen. It didn't have to be what was right, but they wanted it to happen. So Pilate took some water and in front of them all washed his hands and kind of ceremonial tried to say he was innocent. He said, "I'm innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." And the people responded, "Let his blood be on us and on our children. And in one way, they would be guilty of condemning Jesus, but in another way, Jesus' blood really would be poured out for them and their children and the whole world. Kind of a prophetic statement there. And so Pilate, he decided to do what the people wanted. He said, release Barabbas, flog Jesus, and then take him to be crucified. And that's the account of Jesus before Pilate.